Hello, and welcome to World of Warbirds. I'm Brian Pierce. Development and production. The P-63 Kingcobra was an updated P-39 and incorporated many changes, including suggestions from the Russians' experiences in operating their P-39 Kobrushkas, or Little Cobras. The center of gravity was moved to improve the fighter's spin characteristics. More pilot armor was added, as well as more hardpoints and extra fuel tanks. The Kingcobra got a new airfoil, a four-bladed prop, and a second automatic supercharger that would kick in at higher altitudes, adding 10,000 feet to the P-63's service ceiling. One P-63 prototype was even fitted with a Packard V1650, which was the US-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin. However, the use of this engine for further Kingcobras was rejected due to its scarcity and its need in building the P-51 Mustang. Eventually, 3,303 P-63 Cobras were built, the vast majority of them going to the Soviet Union, who would continue to fly them until 1953. Now, the USAAF did operate several hundred Kingcobras, but not in a way that you would expect. Operation Pinball. During the war, a tremendous number of aerial gunners needed to be trained by the USAAF to man the guns of the vast fleets of its heavy and medium bombers. Although it may initially seem easy to be an air gunner, just point your gun at the enemy and blast away, it is actually very difficult to hit a moving target from a moving platform with a machine gun that is also bouncing around with its own firing motion. It is very hard to turn men, who may have had little to no experience with shooting before, into aerial gunners. Many techniques were used at the gunnery training schools, such as starting with shotguns and clay pigeons, and guns mounted on the back of moving platforms or trucks. They could also shoot at banners being pulled by tug airplanes. Sophisticated gun cameras were developed to simulate fire at attacking fighters from the actual gun positions of medium and heavy bombers. But the main problem was that there was no immediate feedback about how the student gunner was doing. He had to wait for hours until the gun camera film was processed after the flight. If only there was a way for American gunners to practice with the 1940s equivalent of paintball. Actually, there was. And it was called Operation Pinball. For the kids out there, real pinball was an arcade game with a metal ball controlled with flippers that you would aim at targets for points, just so you know. The first step for Operation Pinball was to develop a non-lethal bullet, and researchers from Duke University came up with a .30 caliber bullet made of powdered lead and bakelite, which was an early form of plastic that could be fired from a minimally modified machine gun. These bullets would break apart and splinter when they hit a solid target, without punching through. They tested the bullets by firing them at heavy aluminum panels at ranges as close as 30 to 40 feet, and sure enough, the bullets broke up without making holes. In early 1944, this training bullet entered production under the designation T-44. The next step was to find some real target airplanes that could simulate German Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf fighters for the student gunners to shoot at. The USAAF said, "Here, take a few of these Bell P-63 Kingcobras. We don't want them anyway." So, in mid-1944, Bell took 5 P-63As out of the production line and heavily modified them for Operation Pinball. All the armament was removed, and all of the forward aluminum was replaced with much thicker armored panels. The windscreen and side windows were replaced with armored glass. Over 100 microphone sensors were installed behind the armored panels and wired to indicate hits on a counter in the cockpit. A bright red light replaced the cannon muzzle in the propeller spinner and would flash each time the plane was hit, giving the student gunner the immediate feedback that was desired. These heavily modified Kingcobras were known as RP-63As, the R meaning that they were restricted from use in actual combat. They were painted orange to make them more visible to the student gunners. The last step was to find some pilots willing to fly these target Kingcobras. They had to be willing to fly their orange aircraft directly at bombers and be shot at by their own countrymen. So, who did it? Well, it was a mix of brand new 19 or 20-year-old pilots on their first assignments, and others were combat veterans returning from tours overseas. The Pinball Kingcobras were a challenge to fly. Although the Allison engine had plenty of horsepower, all the armor made the aircraft quite heavy, meaning that they were not as maneuverable as the regular P-63, and they had a tendency to stall if maneuvered too abruptly. And what was it like to fly these missions? The first problem for the pinball pilots must have been simply psychological. For both the newbies and the veterans, initially there was that fear that they were setting themselves up in these orange aircraft to be deliberately shot at. Perhaps it was worse for the vets. They had already experienced the fear and stress of combat and were now having to overcome all their instincts to be purposefully blasted at by plane loads of student gunners. However, the pilots soon learned that these simulated pinball attacks were not really that much of a deal, and were actually fun. They'd climb up several thousand feet higher than the B-17s or B-24s and swoop in, replicating the attacks of the Luftwaffe in Europe, and the gunners would open up. Surprisingly, often the pinball pilots didn't even feel the hits. They would only know that their airframe had been struck by the sensors that registered hits on a counter in the cockpit. They would then radio the results to the instructors in the shooting aircraft. Oh, there was the occasional problem. Sometimes a trigger-happy gunner wouldn't stop shooting once the pinball fighters broke off their attack and exposed their soft, unarmored parts. At that point, even the modified bullets would punch through the empennage, rudder, and horizontal stabilizers. But the ground crews would then tape up the holes and send the pinballs off to fly again. However, if the bullets hit the wing root ducts that supplied air to the engine's cooling system, then the 1800 horsepower engine would quickly overheat, necessitating a choice between bailing out or putting the heavy fighter down for a dead stick landing. As the program was such a success, 95 RP-63As were ordered, followed by 200 more in early 1945. As more pinball aircraft and sufficient training ammunition became available, the program was expanded to all 7 of the USAAF's gunnery schools. With the end of World War II, most of the pinball Kingcobras were put into mothballs, and soon enough, human aerial gunners were being replaced by radar-aimed guns, which ended the entire program. If you enjoy stories like this, please send me a super thanks or a like and subscribe to never miss a thing. Please leave comments. I read them all and respond to most. Check out the World of Warbirds kit shop to purchase a t-shirt, coffee mug, poster, or other merch. Until next time.